Welcome to Novelist Spotlight. This is Mike Consul, your host. In addition to being the host of this podcast and interviewing novelists, I am a novelist myself. I have 3 published novels. My latest is titled Lolita Firestone, a supernatural novel, and it is set in Sedona, Arizona and Cairo, Egypt. My previous novel is titled Family Recipes, a novel about Italian culture, Catholic guilt, and the culinary crime of the century. And my first novel is named Hardwood, a novel about college basketball and other games young men play. And that story deals with issues ranging from depression and racism to sex, religion, and university politics. All 3 novels are listed in the episode notes. I hope you will buy them, I hope you will read them, and I hope you will thoroughly enjoy them. Now, on with our program. In the spotlight is Meg Mitchell Moore. She has worked for several years as a journalist for a variety of publications before she turned to fiction. She lives in the coastal town of Newburyport, Massachusetts, with her husband and her 3 daughters. Her latest novel is titled Summer Stage, and it's her 8th novel and a so-called beach read that we hear about every summer. Now, other than Summer Stage, her other novels are titled Vacation Land, Two Truths and a Lie, The Islanders, The Admissions, The Captain's Daughter, and So Far Away. That last one sounds like a Carole King song off her Tapestry album. Meg, welcome to the program. Are you a Carole King fan?
I mean, not especially as much as anyone, but no, that I didn't come up with that title. My publisher did, and thank you so much for having me. And I do remember the publisher talking about Carole King when they came up with that. We struggled for that book for the title.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Well, it's a great album. It was the best-selling album of all time for a while, so can't beat that. So let's talk, as I said off the top, you write beach reads, and I want to get your definition of a beach read because I'm not sure everybody defines them the same way. What's your definition of a beach read?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a definition. It's a funny thing that happens, I feel, every spring and some early summer when all the summer books start coming out and people talk about what's a beach read. And I don't know, is it a book you read at the beach? Is it a book that's about a beach? It could be any of those things. I think it's a book that keeps your attention enough that you can take it someplace and sit reading it for a long time while you're soaking up the sun. But I don't think that means it has to be about a beach or take place on a beach. Often they do. So I don't really know the answer to that question.
Now, you live in a beach community and you write what are considered beach reads are talk about just the beach as a venue for the novel. How often are your novels actually set in a beach community, or you have a lot of happenings that occur on the beach, the consciousness of the reader that there's the sand, there's the shore, there's the ocean waves, all those things that you can hear and smell and feel your feet in, which, aren't we all taught that good writing engages all of the senses? And anytime you're on a beach, it seems like it's a fairly easy thing to do because almost everybody's been to a beach. Sorry for the long-winded question, but the essence of the question is how often do you actually set your scenes on a beach?
So I would say my last 4 novels are probably the ones of my 8 that are considered quote unquote beach reads. And they're all set in summer type settings. 2 on Block Island, which is a small island off the coast of Rhode Island. 1 on the coast of Maine, which actually has very few sandy beaches. It's mostly rocky coast. And 1 in the town where I live, Newburyport, Massachusetts. The other 4 books they're all set different places, but I didn't consciously think I need a book that feels like summer or that is in a summer setting. And I had a publisher change partway through. The Islanders, my 2019 novel, was the first book with my new publisher. And I think it became a little more consciously beach settings after that. So I would say for the last 4, I've had a lot of beach, but not always the same kind of beach. The Maine coast is very, very different from the sandy beaches of Block Island. And really, I think what I write about is community and sense of place. And so those last 4 books have had I think all of my books have had a strong sense of place, but I think in particular, those last 4 books have a very strong summer sense of place, but not always necessarily beach.
Gotcha. So I took the liberty of looking up a definition, that this one's supplied by Book Riot, and it talks about beach reads is a publishing term used to refer to the blockbuster books published during the summer. And today, let's see, it says today, the year's most anticipated reads often come out in late spring. Over time, the term beach read began to describe a particular kind of book, something that has mass appeal, among other attributes. So not a bad thing. Having mass appeal is a good thing. Writers do want to make a living.
Right.
So Meg, you began writing really early in life, according to your bio, back when you were learning cursive in classrooms, which a lot of classrooms don't even teach anymore. What was it about writing that drew you in?
Yeah, I've always been a writer. I've always been a big reader. So I think it probably started there. I mean, I grew up in a time before the internet and before other distractions. And I come from a family of readers. So we have always read. That's what we did for fun. And we moved around a lot when I was a kid. My father was a naval officer. And so we moved every few years. And my mom, who is still a big reader now, would always take us first to the public library and get us our library card. And that was kind of the first step to any new town. So it all began with reading for me. And then I grew to love writing from there. And I always have loved it, but not always. I didn't always know that fiction is where I would end up. I worked as a journalist for a long time. I studied English literature, undergraduate and in graduate school, thinking I would be an academic. So I was sort of dancing around the fiction for a while without really committing to it. And then eventually I did commit to it. And here I am.
Now, your dad, you said, was a Navy officer. You were a Navy brat. Is that right, growing up?
I was a Navy brat. Yep, that's right.
So you're exposed to a lot of different places, a lot of different people. I would think that creates rich soil for the creation of characters. You must have learned how to get along with people because you were here's the new girl in class right in the middle of the semester, probably exactly. In some cases. Yeah. Talk about what it did for you as a person, how it benefited you. I know that's tough stuff as well, having to be the new kid in class and being uprooted and leaving your friends. But from a personal standpoint, what did it do for you? And do you extrapolate from all those experiences and use it for your writing as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's hard to know what parts of a fully formed person are from experience or temperament. So I'd say, so I don't even know looking back. I definitely have the temperament of an observer, and that helps writers tremendously. I don't know if I would have had that if I hadn't moved around so much. So it's really hard to know what came first. We were lucky that we always moved in the summer. So I never had to start the classroom in the middle of the year, but I did move my senior year of high school. So that was the one that was like, that's really that was tough. However, I moved to this tiny town in Maine where at the time there was a naval base. The town is called Winter Harbor. The naval base is not there anymore, but it was at the time. And that is the setting basically of my novel, The Captain's Daughter, which came out in 2017. So it's a fictionalized version of that town. So in retrospect, I was picking up things all along the way, probably with every experience. If you asked me during that senior year in high school, was this going to benefit me later? I would have said, absolutely not. I wish I hadn't had to move. So I think it helped in various ways, but definitely, I mean, by nature, I'm, never the loudest one in the room. I'm always sort of watching other people or listening to other people's stories rather than telling my own. So it's hard to know what came first, but I think it all worked together really well.
So your dad must have been a bit of a disciplinarian. He's a Navy man. And I don't know if he was strict, if he issued orders to you. Were there things about the way you were brought up that you have now transferred to your daughters?
Oh, that's funny. Well, I am the stricter one of between my husband and me, I would say. I don't know if I get that from my dad or not. My dad is the kind of, I mean, he's not strict anymore, but he's still around. Yeah, we were definitely a little intimidated by him at times, for sure. He has that sort of military demeanor. And when we lived in Maine, he was the commanding officer of the whole base. So I saw other people being, scared of him and intimidated by him and respectful of him. And that's sort of how I grew up. But yeah, I think kids are growing up differently now. I think it's very interesting to see my three girls one is already 20, but two teenagers and a 20-year-old. So they're mostly all cooked now. But I don't know. I think we try to do a good mix, but I think it's a different generation of parenting now than it was when I grew up, for sure. And the military aspect of it definitely puts a little different spin on things.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you just one more question about your dad, and I'll test your memory on this one. Did he serve on a destroyer, on a frigate, on a aircraft carrier, a submarine? Do you recall? Or maybe multiple?
I know I'm not going to get this all right. So, Dad, if you're listening, I'm sorry. He was definitely on submarines when I was born. I was born in Rhodes, Maine, because he was stationed there and he was on submarines then. And I know that much, and I'm going to mess up the rest if I try it because I'm not good with that. I bet you my husband would be able to tell you better because he's better about paying attention to that. But he had many different roles, and he was in intelligence when we lived in Maine, because that's what the base up there in Winter Harbor, Maine was doing.
Well, he certainly doesn't have claustrophobia if he spent time on a submarine. I've been on a military submarine, not because I served in the service, but it was one that I had gone on board it was basically a museum at the time. It was amazing how such small spaces that the seamen have to occupy. Well, good for your dad. Now, let me ask you about this thing in your past. You at one point picked up, this is 2012, you, your husband, your daughters moved from Massachusetts to Northern California. And what town in Northern California did you move to?
We were in the town of Danville, which is east of.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful town, not far from me.
Okay, where are you?
Now I'm in Modesto, but I used to be in the East Bay. So Modesto is more Central Valley, but our office, the office that I work for that I work in as a magazine editor is in San Ramon, California, which is not far.
Yeah, we're really close to San Ramon.
Yeah, but it didn't live up to your expectations. It says you lasted exactly 1 year. You returned to the coastal town of Newburyport, Massachusetts. What about California didn't agree with you? I know that the Danville's a very wealthy town. I know it's just pretty hoity-toity, according to some people. I don't know if that was part of it or there was something else going on.
Yeah, it was. We had a really, really good year full of great experiences. But when we looked, and my husband really liked it there, and we had moved there for his job. But the rest of us couldn't see ourselves there forever. And we sort of decided, rather than wait 2 more years and pull kids out of school, we would just move right back before they even knew they had been gone. So it was, California, as you know, has some very amazing parts. It was too hot for me. That's one thing. That climate, that desert heat in Danville. Oh my gosh, I couldn't take it. That was part of it. We met some wonderful people, but yes, there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of money constantly moving into California. The real estate was crazy. Everything was so expensive, and our family was far from us. And we just thought, I don't think we see the rest of our lives here. So let's just get back to the East Coast while we still can.
So Newburyport, you went back to Newburyport, which says to me that you obviously like the town very much, and the grass isn't greener on the other side. You didn't pick a different spot like Providence or Kennebunkport or somewhere like that. What attributes does Newburyport have that attracts you? Also, has it been used I think you did use it as a venue in one of your novels, didn't you?
I did for two, actually. My second novel, So Far Away, was set in Newburyport, and my my 2020 novel, Two Truths and a Lie, is also set in Newburyport. It's just it's a fabulous town. It's a really great town to bring a family up in. And I think because I did move around as a kid, I didn't have that one hometown that I could, go back and see my friends from, come back from college and go out on the night before Thanksgiving and all these small town things I always hear about. But my kids did have a chance at that kind of upbringing, and this very safe, wonderful town with pretty good schools and gorgeous, gorgeous beaches and woods and really nice natural beauty, and close to Boston and close to Maine. It's kind of perfect in a lot of ways. So it was also close to I think at the time, the job my husband was coming back to. So there are a lot of reasons, but we wanted our kids to have the grounding in one place if we could give it to them. So we decided just to stick with continuity.
Tell us about your new novel, Summer Stage, and tell us about Amy Trevino.
Sure. Amy Trevino is one of the three main points of view in the novel. I always have rotating points of view from third person. I can't seem to stick to one, even if I try to. So this, like most of my novels, has these three characters, and she's one, and she is a high school English teacher and drama director and the sister of a very famous actor. And she lives in Narragansett, Rhode Island, which is across the water from this island, this tiny island, Block Island, where she grew up. And her brother, the famous actor, comes back to direct a summer theater production, and she becomes the production manager. And she has a 19-year-old daughter who's sort of escaping this TikTok infamy that she got caught up in, who's also home for the summer. And they all sort of are helping out with the production and learning a little bit about themselves and about each other that they didn't know.
Interesting. So I'm curious about, so Block Island is Rhode Island, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. That particular setting was used for what reason?
I set my 2019 novel, The Islanders, there, and that was a little bit of a random choice where I didn't know the island at all, but I had always been curious about it. So I got to know it, and I wrote a novel set there. And then I had 2 other novels set different places, and I wanted to set another book on Block Island. It's a wonderful place for a lot of reasons, and I wanted to just keep writing about the same characters. And then my editor said, I think we're done with those characters. Let's think of a new story to put here. And this is what I came up with. So I have some characters from other novels who pop in here and there, but they aren't the central people.
And the readout on this one from the publicist is a spirited summer page turner following a family of actors grappling with fame, scandal, and ambition. That's a draw alone right there. Just that description. You're on book number 8. This is novel number 8. But, you started as a journalist, and I suppose it's not unusual for journalists to decide they want to become book authors. What motivated you back when you became a journalist? You studied English, you said, in college, and something else? Was it just English, or?
It's just English. And then I studied, I got a master's in English literature also. So I thought I was going the academic route, but I wasn't.
Oh, okay. So you ended up becoming a journalist. Talk about that. What did you like being a journalist, or was there anything about journalism that pushed you away at all, or that you found to be unappetizing?
I liked it a lot. I was working mainly when I had a full-time job. I was working for for a couple of technology magazines and some business publications, which wasn't my area of expertise, but I really liked the work. I started as a copy editor actually with my first job, and I love that kind of work. I really like copy editing. And then I became an editor, and I really liked that too. But I sort of was trying to get to writing the whole time. And eventually I did. And I worked for these technology magazines for a while. And then I became a freelance journalist for a few years before finally getting the fiction going. So I've done all different kinds. I do like it a lot. There are things I still miss about it. I really like having a deadline and having, shorter pieces that you can finish and be done, and you see them in a week or a month and not in 18 months the way it is with novels. So some of that immediacy I think is really nice. But I was never a hardcore, I didn't do hardcore news or political journalism or that sort of thing.
Well, you did work with technology magazines now, so it's been a while now, but are you still adept with technology?
No, I mean, no, using it probably, but I would not be able to write about it now. I'm not sure I knew how to write about it then. I was definitely learning on the job. But that's the thing about writing. I mean, my job was to talk to technical people about their jobs and make it readable to people who might not understand it. So right. in a way, that was a nice kind of challenge. But no, it isn't my area of expertise whatsoever.
Gotcha. Do your girls do video games?
They don't. No, they never have been. Yeah, the world of gaming is very foreign to me. I don't know anything about it.
So your college years were spent where?
Providence College in Rhode Island.
Oh, Providence. Okay, very good. And was your master's degree also from there?
No, that was from New York University.
Oh, NYU. Wow. Okay, very good. So talk about the transition from journalism to fiction writing. I've told this story before about Tom Wolfe, who wrote books that were essentially narrative nonfiction. He was doing journalism, but he wrote really exciting books. And he thought, I'll just switch over and write some novels. And he ended up finding himself crestfallen by the whole thing, because he suddenly realized, wow, writing a novel, which he thought was going to be a simple step, turned out to be kind of devastating for him. He had to go on for months and months before it started to click for him. Did you find that transition to be difficult, or was it a natural for you?
I found it to be difficult to find an agent and to get published. Those steps took a little while for me. I didn't have any, secret path or didn't know anybody in the business. I had to just do it the old fashioned way and find an agent by querying agents. So that part took a long time. The actual writing, I think, is actually easier having the journalism background because I'm used to writing. A lot of times I'll sit down and I'll say, okay, I'm going to write 1,000 words or 1,200 words today. So I still think in word counts the way I did when I was writing for magazines. And I'm really good at being edited, which I think is great to have a journalism background for that. Nobody likes to have everything torn apart, but I don't have a huge ego over things that aren't working. I understand that it takes a team to create something good. So I think journalism was a help in most of the ways rather than a hindrance.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? People need to kind of relax because editors do go to work on copy, and hopefully, a good editor will make it better. But that can be difficult to get accustomed to, or if somebody feels that they have a bad editor. I think everybody, when they're early in their journalism career, thinks all editors are bad editors until they start to get a little bit more objective about it.
Right. It's a tough job. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you read while you're writing? Now, I don't mean, the reason I ask this question is I've talked to authors who say, I can't read when I write because I start to take up or take on some of the flavor of what I'm reading. And I remember that Sidney Sheldon used to say, I don't read anything when I'm writing. And he used to just hide himself away and completely immerse himself in what he's writing and didn't read anything else. Of course, he would crank out what no doubt was considered a beach read at the time. And I think still to this day, but he would crank that out in, a few months, just isolate himself to do that. Do you read simultaneously, or do you like to go on a reading fast?
I do read. I always have one book going and usually an audio book going at the same, not literally at the same time, but simultaneously. So, yeah, I've heard that too from writers. I don't stop. I think sometimes I might pick up a book that's a style that I am comfortable, that gets me going. Sometimes I'll read a little piece of something just to be inspired, not so I can write the same thing, but just so I can understand how language can work. So I find it helpful. I think if I were trying to write maybe a very particular kind of book, a thriller or something, maybe I wouldn't read in that exact genre, but I don't think about it too much.
Do you ever write while you're at the beach? Go to the beach and put out a sand chair and an umbrella and write? No, that's not your venue for writing. Where do you write?
Ellen Hildebrand writes her books like literally on the beach with a pen and a paper.
Who does that?
Ellen Hildebrand. I think she is often writing on the beach. But I feel like the sun is the sand. It just seems messy to me. I can't do it. So I usually write at home. If I have quiet at home, I will write at home. That's my favorite place, but I don't like writing in the middle of chaos, which there often is at my house. So if everybody's at work and school, and then I will work in a small home office I have. If there's too many people around, I will go to a cafe or something, because I can work with other people's background noise as long as it's not like, people asking me for things or telling me things. So I don't mind. I don't need total quiet, but I do need to be a little disengaged from requests for dinner or whatever.
Yeah, I get it. So what, in addition to that, what is your method? Are you a word count person? Do you put an X number of hours per day when you're running full throttle, or is it catch as catch can? How do you work?
I'm mostly a word count person when I'm drafting. When I get close, so between 1,000 and 1,200, sometimes up to 1,500 words a day, depending, which takes a few hours usually. So that's what I try to do on all working days, which would normally be, my kids are starting to head off to college, so things are shifting, but would normally be during the school day is when I would do those hours. I don't write well at night, so I don't usually go back to anything at night. I might go back and answer emails and that kind of thing, but typically I don't write at night. And so I usually write in little chunks of time. Like I do that tomato timer method, the Pomodoro technique, I think it's called, where I have that, like the actual little red tomato timer, and I set it for 25 minutes and I just try to concentrate and not check email. And after every 25 minutes, I take a 5-minute break to do whatever I need to do. And then I can check email or answer a text. And then I try to do 4 or 5 of those and then take a longer break. So if I do that twice or maybe 3 times, that's kind of a work day. And usually by then I've reached my word count. If I'm really late on a draft, I will write more words, or I will go away for a few days and write, and really concentrate. So I usually have to go away a couple times during a draft to really get things done.
That method you're talking about, 25 minutes in a break or whatever denomination you're talking about, I think a lot of times people don't realize just how enervating writing is, and that those breaks are really pretty critical, rather than sitting for 3 consecutive hours, say, just
Right.
getting that little break and being able to get up and walk a little bit and just create a little bit of physical stimulation. I always find that physical stimulation creates mental stimulation and is good for creativity. When you say draft, are you talking about your first draft, or are you talking about a thorough outline?
I'm talking about the first draft. I usually write a pretty messy first draft. Maybe I'll have a very basic outline, but not a detailed outline. And then I will usually write an outline after, when I look and see everything that's missing. And then I'll work from an outline for the second draft, depending on, how bad the first draft was. But my first drafts I just get them down. I get them down. They're not always in order. When I am writing them, they're very messy. They're terrible. And then I work from there. But I have to kind of get that down first.
Do you outline at all? Do you use an outline to start with and then you start drafting?
No, sometimes really rudimentary. I'll have just, a few 5 things written down, or some basic things that happen in chapters, but nothing detailed. So the outlining I do usually after. And even then it's not that detailed. It will just be, here's a 1 sentence that happens in this chapter. I don't really go into great detail with the outline, but I find that if I'm stuck somewhere, the plot isn't working out, usually an outline can help me see what's missing.
Now, if you were to compare first draft from Meg Mitchell Moore today versus when you were writing your first novel, are they the same, just in terms of, look, they're sloppy, they're messy, they're the first rough draft of history, as we say in journalism, and that's just the way writing is? Or do you feel that your first draft has improved over time?
It has maybe improved a very tiny bit, but not by much. I think the only thing that has improved is that I know that the book has a home, so I know I'll work out whatever problems there are. That first time, there's so much uncertainty about, why am I even doing this? I don't even have an agent. This will never get published. This is terrible. I don't know what to do. But at least now, when I feel like things are terrible, I think, okay, but my editor's going to read it and she's going to help me and we'll figure it out. And I kind of know what I'm trying to do, so I know I'll get there. So I don't think the actual draft is much better now. It depends a little bit on the book. The first draft for Summer Stage was actually pretty decent for me. Not like it wasn't ready for anybody to really read it, but it was like kind of all together in the first draft. I kind of had most of the pieces. But the first draft for the book I'm working on now is nowhere near ready. I have to do a lot more work on that one. So sometimes it depends on the book, but it certainly has not gotten amazingly better over time.
Now, the book you're working on now is your successor to Summer Stage.
Right.
Not that they're connected. But what can you tell us about your next one?
I can tell you that it needs a lot of work, and that it is also set on Block Island, same setting as Summer Stage. It is very loosely inspired by The Great Gatsby, but set in contemporary times and with the genders switched. So it very loosely follows the outline of Gatsby, not even, but it is somewhat inspired by, and it's looking a lot at the American dream and class and privilege and those questions that I find endlessly fascinating.
You mentioned you were writing, and why am I doing this? I don't even have an agent. How did you get an agent? What was your big break? Was it your first novel was So Far Away? Is that correct?
I know that was my second novel. My first novel is called The Arrivals, and it came out in 2011. So I had been working, I was freelancing, but my kids were very young at the time. So I was sort of not working a ton, but I was working and also trying to write a novel and not really knowing how to do any of it. And then for 1 year, we got some really good childcare. And I thought, okay, I'm going to spend half my childcare time on the nonfiction that's paying and half on working on this novel. And so I did finally get a draft down, again, a messy draft, a bad draft. And I started querying agents at that time. And I just kept writing letters to agents until somebody answered me. And that's my amazing agent, Elizabeth Weed, who is still my agent today. So I had a lot of people say, I like it, but I don't love it. Or I'd like to read a chapter, and then they would request the full manuscript and then they would turn it down, or some, I would have enough sort of close calls that I thought, oh, I should probably keep going. So I just kept going until I finally got the right person, because you have to find not just any person, but the right person who understands your work and what you're trying to do. And that book still needed a lot of editing before we sent it out to publishers. And my agent and I worked on that together, and even used an outside editor for a few months for sure before we even tried to sell it. So it wasn't ready, but at least there was somebody who knew that, or thought that I could probably get there if we worked hard enough on it. It wasn't an easy process. It was not. I mean, you definitely hear all kinds of stories. People can go about it different ways, but my way was just kind of long and not that much fun. And it actually took a while.
Now, was it the standard thing where you send out the query letter, you have a sample pages, and then your agent had said, I'd like to see the whole manuscript?
Yeah, I think she must have. I can't quite remember now. It was a long time ago, but I think that's what happened. And I do remember that I remember that one agent, and I don't even know who it was. I remember her writing back to me and saying, I'm not the right agent for this book, but I know you'll find a home for it. And I really clung. I wish I knew who it was so I could thank her, but I really clung to those words. I thought, okay, she said, I'll find a home for it. This person I don't even know. And maybe she says that to everybody. I don't know, but that helped me so much, because she knew she told me that she thought I could get there. And so that just kept me going for a while. So I guess I must have my current agent, I'll have to ask her what she remembers. I think I probably just sent the query letter and she asked for the book at some point. I just remember her calling me and telling me that she wanted to take me on. And I couldn't believe it was happening, because I've been waiting for so long.
To get any response at all is just a big deal. I mean, you got positive response. So that's truly a big deal. I'm not surprised that you were inspired by that. Is there any one of your books and any one of your novels that came particularly easily that you would look back on and think, if all of them could come this easily, and I could feel this kind of relationship to the writing, I'd be that much happier with what I'm doing. Not that you're not happy with what you're doing, but was there one that came especially easily, or that you feel like is your premium effort?
I think I would say Summer Stage, probably my newest one, probably came most smoothly. Before
Do you know why?
that, no, I just kind of knew who the characters were. I didn't have to figure them out. I understood them. And I had a lot of it takes place around this summer theater production. And I have these two wonderful friends who, one's an actor and one's a casting director, and they were sort of walking me through the process. So they just helped me understand the whole world. So I felt like I got it really easily. And it was, I don't want to say easy, because that's not true, but easier to write it. And I sort of always knew where everybody was headed. So that was probably the smoothest. Before that, I have a novel called The Admissions, which is the one I wrote after we had lived in California for a year, that has to do with college admissions and crazy California people with money. And that one didn't come easy either. And I had to find a new publisher for that. So that was a long process. But I do remember that story always felt comfortable to me. I always felt like I know what I'm trying to get at. But sometimes you don't know, and you really have to figure it out as you're going. And that can be painful.
Now, has your husband ever read one of your novels and said, hey, this sounds suspiciously like me? I mean, not that you would write him entirely, but maybe he was enough of a composite figure that he said, that sounds like you're writing about me a little bit.
Well, I think he's probably thought that more than he said it to me. I'm not really sure. You have to ask him. I heard him tell someone the other day that there's a character in The Islanders who wears gray t-shirts. And I heard him tell somebody that that was the closest he's ever been to being in a book, was he also wears a lot of gray t-shirts. And I don't even know if I base the gray t-shirts on him. So I don't see a lot of similarities in what I'm writing to people. I know I really don't do any of that on purpose, and I don't think I do much of it. But yeah, people always People will look, and if you look hard enough, you'll find something. Sure.
How do you think your writing will change with age? I mean, if you look down the road 10, 20, 30 years, I mean, you're still a young woman. So there's a lot of time, a lot of track ahead of you. And so, yeah, how do you think it will change? I mean, will you still be doing beach reads, do you think? Or is there another type of writing that you kind of have on the shelf right now because, look, this is working for me. And every time I write one, the publishing company and my agent want another one. But in the back of my mind, there's this other type of novelization that I would take a stab at, given a little breathing space.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I've thought enough about that. I have always wanted to write a thriller because I so admire a really good thriller. So maybe someday I'll do that. I don't, but the people who do that well just do it so well, and I don't know how they do it. So that's a little bit in the back of my mind. I don't know. That's a great question. I'll be curious to find out.
I'll let you know in 20, 30 years, right?
Back.
What about, do you spend any time thinking in terms of the number of characters, as in, I mean, I've read novels before that had too many characters. And then, there's some great historic novels that have almost no characters. I mean, I think of The Old Man and the Sea, where there's essentially, one character and a fish and the kid on the shore. But I mean, very few, but a masterpiece. And then you have masterpieces that have a lot of characters. Do you, or maybe you've run into situations where your agent or your editor said, that you've got too many voices, you've got too many people to track, you've got too many entangled relationships. Do you run into that? Or do you find that organization is maybe one of your strengths as a writer?
Organization is not one of my strengths. I wish it were. I find I sometimes want to write in too many points of view. Yeah, because I do like the multiple points of view. And I found that 3 works really well, but I'm always like, what about if we had 5? Or what if this person had a little chapter? So sometimes I will stick in, actually in the last draft of my novel that needs work, I did have a point of view that is coming out because she really wasn't necessary, but I liked her so much. So I just kept writing her, but she really doesn't have enough to do with the story. So I think I do struggle with that. I really, I think I said, I admire those novels that are first person all the way through, a captivating voice that isn't the voice of the author, but it's just this voice. And they just tell a story that way. And I don't think I'll ever, maybe that's what I'll do. Maybe that's what I'll do in 20 years. I would like to one day be able to do that. That's amazing to me. A really good first person all the way through point of view that's not like me writing myself.
Now you mentioned, go ahead. Finish that.
Oh, no.
Well, you had mentioned rotating points of view, and some of my favorite books have had rotating points of view. And that's a staple for you, it sounds like. Talk about why rotating points of view appeals to you so much from a writing perspective.
I think it's just the way I think. It's the way my brain works. It's the kind of book I like to read also. It doesn't mean that that's all I read, but I find that the books I gravitate toward are generally told in more than one point of view, generally third person, not always. And sometimes there's an exception to that, but I just can't seem to tell a story any other way. I kind of want to know what all the people are doing and I want to see them come together. I think it's technically more challenging that way because you have to figure out, does this person know what that person knows? And you have to really be straight on all of that. And you can get yourself tangled up really easily, which sometimes I do. So I think it's just how my brain works. I've tried other things. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me.
I asked you earlier about organization, and here we are talking about the rotating point of view. What about the strongest part of your writing game? What do you consider yourself to be your primary strength? I mean, is it dialogue? Is it creating characters? Is it description, plotting, pacing, mood?
It's not plot. I think plot is my weakest. So my strongest is character or place, I think, and sometimes dialogue. And I'm really good. I think I'm really good at writing teen characters, especially, and also kid characters. And that's what people have pointed out about I almost always have, actually, I don't, maybe that's why my current book needs work. Maybe it needs a teenager, but I almost always have a parent and child dynamic somewhere in the book. In my last summer's novel, Vacation Land, it was younger kids. I think they were like 13, 10, and 7. And I just loved those kids, and the readers really loved those kids, and especially this one little girl named Claire. She's 7 or 8, I can't remember, but people just love this girl, and I loved her too. So I think that is one of my strengths, is writing younger characters and just characters in general, and dialogue when things are going well, and setting generally, but not plot. Plot is where I need the help. So I think everyone has their weakness. I feel like I can get down all those other pieces, and then somebody else has to say to me, yeah, but this doesn't make sense, or what's going to happen. And I sort of need an outside voice at that point to help me.
So what about, it sounds to me like your daughters they've been a real help just in terms of understanding teenage sensibilities, the dialogue between them, the things that upset them, the drama that seems to crop up. Would you say that your daughters have appeared in your books in one way or another? I mean, not that they're the same people, but only that they've given you, they've kind of fortified you with that whole mentality of the teenage girl.
Yeah, I would say so. Not specifically, because they would never forgive me. And also, they haven't read, one of my daughters has read a few books, but 2 of them haven't read any books, so they wouldn't even know. But I don't I might put something, if they used to say something funny when they were little, if they pronounced a word one way or used a funny term, I might put some of that in there, but not specifics about them. But for sure, being around teens a lot, as I am, and watching, high school dynamics go on, which are fascinating to me, way more fascinating than when I was in high school. I like watching their friendships develop, and maybe their first relationships, and their senses of humor and their awareness of the world. So I love sort of having a front row seat to all that, but also just the world they're all growing up in, the world of social media, which is not a world I had to grow up in, and watching what they have to deal with on a daily basis and how they do it. They don't know any different because this is their world, but it's crazy and fascinating. And I feel like I just could watch it forever.
How about the naming of characters? How much emphasis do you put on that? And do you have do you keep a file of potential names? Do you put a lot of emphasis on naming characters?
I should do that. I should have a file. I don't have a file. I do think about it a lot. I try not to have anything so crazy and exotic that it couldn't, really be a person, but also not. No, I do have some pretty basic names in my books. I do try to make sure it matches, the race or cultural background and age of the person, because I think that's important. I try not to name characters names of people I know, and that in my novel, 2 Truths and a Lie, that takes place in my town where I live, that book had a lot of characters. They weren't all important characters, but there was a group of 12 moms and 12 daughters, and that, they all had names, even if they didn't play a really important part in the plot. And that I really concentrated on, because everyone needed to be a name that would make sense for that age, but also not somebody that I knew. So it wouldn't look like I was writing about somebody. And I remember thinking, okay, I know a lot of people named Heather already, so I can't have a Heather, and I can't have a whatever it was. So I had to do some thinking, and keeping all that straight was tricky. But for the most part, I look at a lot of lists of, boys born in 1945, what would they be named, and that sort of thing. And that's usually where I start. Last names can be trickier, because I feel like you want it to be slightly different, but not crazy different. You don't want a name that nobody can pronounce. So that can be a little trickier. So I go through this, but I should keep a file. I think I'll start doing that. Thank you.
I'm amazed at how many books I read that they have a character, and it's like, why'd you make the name difficult? Why'd you do that when the reader doesn't really know how to pronounce it?
Right.
So what?
And now audiobooks are so important that you want the audiobook narrator to be able to pronounce everything correctly.
Yeah, with audio, I understand you listen to audiobooks. I heard you mention them earlier. I listen to a lot of audiobooks because my job has me reading all day. So give my eyes a break and put my ears to work. But you just don't have that issue with an audiobook because somebody obviously had been told how to pronounce it and so on. Let me ask you about the Mom Squad. Who or what is the Mom Squad? The real one and the fictional one?
So in Two Truths and a Lie, the group of 12 moms I mentioned, I myself have a large group of wonderful, mostly mom friends in my town. And for a while, I think we had a group text and it was called the Mom Squad. It has changed names a few different times, but at one point it was called the Mom Squad. And so I used that name. I asked them all, do you guys mind if I use this in my book? And so it's a group of these moms, and my actual Mom Squad is a group of lovely women, but in the book, they are not all so nice, and they're not all nice to one of the main characters. And that's sort of one of the main points of the book, is this outsider comes in and is trying to fit into this unwelcoming group of women. So they're not at all based on my friends, but just the idea of a whole group of women, I think, is something that a lot of people can relate to if they live in a town where people are raising families.
I think that I'm getting back to the first draft, and you talk about how you write a really messy first draft. And I think that's what chases a lot of people away from writing, is that they go to write it and it's like, this thing's a mess, and they feel like I can't do this, not realizing that there's no such thing as an author that doesn't write a lousy first draft. It's just the way, it's part of the process. What would you, I mean, maybe I just said it, but what would you tell the aspiring novelist who's frustrated that their copy isn't coming out very lucid on the first go?
Yeah, my advice is just keep going. Don't stop. Don't look back. Get through the first draft, and then you can fix it. And that might not be the way everybody works. So that might not work for each writer. And there are people I know who do polish every page before they move on to the next one, and they write beautiful books that way. So that is a way. It's not my way. So my advice is, if you feel like you can't do it, just keep going. And then my other thing I always tell people is, if you write 150 words a day, which you can do in 10 minutes, probably less than 10 minutes, it's not very long. It's like less than probably most of your emails. If you do that over a year, you've written at least half a book, and you keep going and you have a book. So all those little groups of words stack up. So don't look at the big picture. Just keep writing the little bits that you can, as many days in a row as you can, and you will eventually have something you can work with. There
you go. Okay. So Summer Stage came out during the summer appropriately. Do all of your books, are they timed in a way that they come out in spring or summer because of the subject matter or the titles? Your titles sound very much like, not all of them, but they sound very much like summertime books.
Right. The last 4 definitely have. I'm trying to think before. Oh yeah, the last 5. Yes, most of them have come out in the summer. And there's so many decisions that go on, and the marketing end of things and the sales ends of things, and everybody in those jobs knows what they're doing. So I always just let people do their jobs, and I say, sure, I'll do whatever I can to help. But that has been the timing. I don't know if that will be that way forever. I think the book I'm working on is a summer book for sure. After that, we'll see. But publishing is there's so many things that happen behind the scenes. I mean, the books that come out in the fall are usually the big literary books by big names, and you don't want to put something out there that's going to get lost in the shuffle. And then you don't want to put a book out. And I forgot I forgot even what happens all throughout the year, but there are so many publishing calendar things that we are not always privy to, and that the experts know and they understand.
Is there any novelist or two that most inspired you?
Oh, when I was just in general in my life, or now?
Yeah, as you were coming of age, well, inspired your writing, for instance, just even maybe before you were writing fiction, you really adored their work, and they were inspirational in some way.
Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, I always go back to the Anne of Green Gables books, because those were my very first, a series that not the first one I loved, but I loved those books so much. So I feel like that was a huge influence on me as a child, as far as writing. Going forward, it's often whatever I'm reading that I love at the time. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Ellen Hildebrand for summer books, and she's been such a supporter of mine too, and I'm really grateful to her. So I love her books, and she's somebody I look to for inspiration, not only how to write so often and so well, but just sort of how to I've just seen her, at book signings and seen how many people are there to see her and how graceful she is with all of that and grateful for all of it too. So that's wonderful to see. But as far as I mean, it's often just what I've recently read. Like I just finished reading Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I hope I'm saying her name right. And that book was so amazing. So now I'm thinking that like there's no other book that's as good as that book. That book is so good. So a lot of times it's just what I'm reading at the time inspires me.
What do you like best about being a novelist?
What do I like best? I like when I get emails from people who really connected with the book for a personal reason. And then I feel so grateful that I'm able to do that for a living.
Now, if somebody was to say, I'm going to start reading your novels and I like what I've heard, what will my takeaway be? What do you want me to walk away with, or what do you expect your readers to find gratifying or as a takeaway?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I want people to be entertained for sure. When you're reading a book that is about, that takes place over the course of a summer, and maybe you're reading it during a summer, I want you to want to go back to it and I want to find out what happens for sure. But I also think if you learn, if you think about human nature in a way that you didn't think before you read the book, or you see yourself or someone in one of the characters and you understand them or yourself a little better, then that's a huge takeaway for me too. And if you get to know a place that you didn't know, that's a big takeaway for me. I mean, my novel last year set on the coast of Maine. I love it when people say, I'm from Texas and I've always wanted to go to Maine and I want to go to that town now. I love that. And I love when people get to know Block Island through my books.
Yeah, I always feel like a sense of place is, and it can even be an unnamed place. I've read novels where it's an unnamed place, but they still create the sense of place that kind of grounds the whole story. So I get what you mean. Right. What would your message be? Now you mentioned, I asked you about first drafts and somebody who's struggling with that. Other than that, what would your message be to the aspiring novelist? What would your best piece of advice be, or your message would be to them?
It would be read a lot. Read as much as you can from the bestseller list or from books that people tell you they loved, and try to figure out why people connected with it. And don't try to do exactly that, but just try to understand it, because I think that can be so important. And a lot of people miss that step. A lot of people think, oh, I can write. It doesn't matter if I read, but I think reading is, 75% of it. Yeah,
very important. You've obviously been a successful novelist, and you're living many people's dream right now. But no doubt, regardless of how good a career is, people always think in terms of another next step or next component. Is there anything that hasn't happened in your career? Well, I'm sure there is, but is there a missing piece, something that you want to happen next? I don't know if any of your books have been made for cinema, or there's some other, or have never been translated into other languages, and that's the next piece that you want to put in place. What isn't there yet in your career that you want to see as the next happening?
Yeah. I've never been on the New York Times bestseller list, so that's a goal for sure. And I would love to see something translated into probably television. And I think it would be Two Truths and a Lie would be my first choice. I think that book could make a really great limited series, sort of along the lines of Big Little Lies, or one of the other there's so many phenomenal 8-episode or 10-episode series that are out there now. So when the writer's strike ends and the writers get everything they need, which I believe they need to get, and they go back to work, I would love to see that.
So what about, as long as we're on cinema, what movie have you seen? Is there a movie or two that kind of you feel very much represent the kind of writing that you do? Like a favorite kind of beach watch, if you will.
Yeah, I don't know about a movie. I'm super into the White Lotus TV series. Have you watched that?
Oh, I love it. My wife and I watch it. We devour it when it comes around.
So I kind of feel like that. I like the way that show walks the line between dark and light, and you get both. And I feel like I like to try to do that sometimes too. So I feel like that's a not a necessarily comparison, but certainly a goal, because I love that kind of storytelling. I love it where you're so invested in these characters and you're also like, well, what are you doing? You're crazy, but you're also laughing at them and you're also a little frightened for them. I really admire works of art that can do all of that.
I like the way you put that. I'm typing it down because I'm going to put it in the episode notes. I think walks the line between darkness and light. And I think that nails it. The way you worded it, I think that's exactly what White Lotus does. And to our listeners, anybody who has not seen White Lotus, highly recommended. And
so good.
Very, very good. Meg, thank you so much for coming on the program and sharing so much of yourself.
Thank you. These were fantastic questions, and I really appreciate your time.